Hey, welcome to Board Gems, a video series in which I, Daryl Boone, talk about older board game gems. The game I'm covering this time is a deck builder, and it's an early deck builder. Now, I don't know if I want to say it's that first wave of deck builders that came after Dominion, but it wasn't too far after that. So you had Dominion, which came out 2008. I know some of the early ones include Thunderstone, which I think was 2009. Ascension was 2010. That's a game I've covered for the channel. This one came out 2011. And it's notable because it is the first, to my knowledge, deck builder, what we now might call a bag builder, because it's a deck builder, but instead of using cards, it uses dice. The game is called Quarriors. That's Warriors with a Q and a U. Single U, not a W. Designed by Mike Elliott and Eric Lang, published by Wizkids. The game comes in batches, has these batches of 5 dice, which players can draft, pay for, just like they might pay for cards, to buy to add to their deck in Dominion. But the dice can represent spells, but they can also represent creatures, and that's how you get points, is by summoning creatures, and the creatures attack creatures that are in other players in front of them that they've called on the previous turn. So it's kind of an attacky game, but it's not personal. Like once I bring out a creature, it attacks everybody at the table. And it did come with a ton of special custom dice. And the first edition looked like this. One of the dice, one of the dragon dice. You can see the symbol there. Of course, it had on the shelf in the game store, would have had a wraparound thing, right? So it has the name and everything. Not super practical, but definitely unique looking. In later editions, they had a more normal box, if you can call that normal. Wicked Extreme! They really went all out to make it look like trying to make it look cool to a 90s kid or something. It's for 2 to 4 players. I would say ages 10 and up, regardless of whatever the box says. And it takes 30 minutes, maybe. It can be slightly less with 2 players, and with 4 players, you might be looking at like 45 minutes. There are actually 2 rule sets. I don't remember if the first edition came with both rule sets or not. I want to say it didn't, but the later editions definitely did. And it just works slightly differently. The second rule set that was published makes the game slightly longer, a little bit less likely for there to be a runaway leader. And so that's what I'm going to show you. I'm going to teach you the game using that rule set. I always use that rule set when I play. I'll talk about whether it's still a gem or not after that. To set up the game, take the scoreboard and put it out here within reach of at least one of the players, to be the scorekeeper. Each player gets a particular color in which they get 1 cube, which is their score tracker. The winner will be the first player to get to 12, 15, or 20 points, depending on number of players. And they also get a bag of the same color as their cube. Each game always has these 3 cards in play. Each player starts with 4 assistants and 8 basic quiddity dice. And these go into your bag to start. Mix those up. Portals are in play in every game. You find the 5 dice matching the card and put it nearby. In addition to these 3 basic cards, there will be 3 spells and 7 creatures. Shuffle up the spell deck and draw 3 cards. If you manage to get one that's the same type, then discard that and draw another one until you have 3 different spells. Then do the same for the creatures. The rest of the cards you can put aside. And I like to sort these by their cost. And for each of these cards, each of these types of cards, there is a set of 5 dice. So you're going to find the dice matching these 10 cards. Pick a start player, and you're ready to begin. The goal of the game is to get victory points. In a 2-player game, for example, you're gunning to get 20 victory points. And the main way of scoring victory points, or glory points in this game, is by scoring creatures. Each creature has a cost to purchase in the top left corner of the card, but also an amount of glory that they score if you're able to score with that creature. In general, your goal is to buy creature dice, summon them during your turn, and then hope they survive one full round around the table. When it comes back to your turn, any creatures that are still in front of you score. And in the advanced rules, you score the points and then the die gets culled. So you'll constantly need to buy creatures again and again in order to keep scoring points. You purchase creatures with quiddity. Each player has 8 basic quiddity dice. Most of the sides show 1, but one of the sides shows 2. That's the basic currency of the game. And in fact, all the cards show some amount of quiddity. So when the dice are rolled, you might not get the creature, which is the symbol, the unique symbol for that creature. You might instead roll quiddity. You start with 12 dice, 8 basic quiddity, and 4 assistants. Assistants are creatures as well, they're just very bad creatures. They are very, very weak. And generally you want to score them so that you can cull them. If you look at the anatomy of a card, besides showing the cost and the amount of glory, as well as the various sides of the die, it shows the special abilities of the creature. In this case, the Quake Dragon. This ability always happens. Some of the sides actually have little asterisks in one corner, the bottom left corner, a burst symbol. Some of them even have 2 burst symbols. And the card will explain anything special that happens if you roll a side with 1 or 2 burst symbols on it. In this case, nothing. On a player's turn, after mixing up their dice, they are going to draw 6 dice. Maybe they'll roll all basic quiddity at the start. And you sum them up. Not very surprising, we got 6 quiddity. There's nothing else you can do because there are no creatures that you've rolled. But with quiddity, you can purchase 1 or 2 cards. You could even buy these if you want to. I don't even bother to put the dice out because generally nobody buys them. So for 6, for example, I could buy one that costs 6, or maybe one that costs 2 and one that costs 4. Let's say I'll buy one of these guys and one of these guys. This is a portal. The portal allows you to draw additional dice on your turn if it comes out. And these dice will go away into a used pile. Everybody else takes a turn, and then my turn again. I draw another 6 dice. If I need more dice and they're not in there, then I would take all the dice from my used pile, put it into my bag, mix it up, and draw until I have 6. Nothing unusual if you're used to deck building games. Now this has a burst symbol, and this is a reroll symbol, which means you can immediately reroll this die, but it also has a burst symbol. What does that mean? Well, if we look on the card, immediate, reroll this die and one other die. So I'm like, okay, I could reroll another die. Now, I have 3 quiddity. I also have these creatures. There's 3 different numbers on a creature die. If you have the icon facing you, have the numbers facing you, the top left number is its level. That's how much quiddity you need to summon it. Quiddity can be used either to purchase dice or to summon creatures. I have 3 level 1 creatures, which means I need 3 quiddity to summon them, and sure enough, I have 3 quiddity. So I'll spend this, and I will ready these creatures. I have summoned them. Now what happens is they attack. The top right number on each die is their attack value. In this case, it's 1. But all the creatures I summon in one turn all attack at the same time. So you add up all the attack values, and that's its total attack value, in this case, 3. I would be sending 3 attack to every other player at the table. I'm doing a simultaneous attack on everybody, in this case, for value 3. What is the bottom right number? You guessed it, it's defense. Even though creatures attack together, They defend individually. If I already had these 3 creatures in front of me, and then somebody sent me an attack of value 3, I would first have to pick the first creature that it defends against. Let's say I pick this one. It has a defense of 2. Well, the attack is 3, so this creature is destroyed. And this would go into my used pile. Now that absorbed 2 attack, there's still 1 left of the attack of 3. I pick another creature, has a defense of 2, it absorbs the entire attack. You don't have to record like, oh, this creature only has 1 hit point left because it started with 2. No, if it has enough defense to withstand the remaining attack, it survives. And so now what's left in front of me is 2 creatures. If it comes back around to me, the start of my turn, if I have any creatures that are in front of me, I score and cull them. Scoring means I get this much glory per creature. So 2 glory, and I would move 2 spaces on the score track. And then these dice get culled. They get returned to the middle of the pile. And that's how you score points. You summon creatures. Those creatures will attack other players' creatures in order to try to defeat them and keep them from scoring. And if those creatures are still in front of you at the start of your turn, you get to score them. By attacking other players, you're trying to keep them from scoring. And you're trying to have your creatures survive so that they score. In addition, in each game you'll always have 3 spell dice. Spells do different things. You buy them just as you would buy creatures. They would go into your used pile, and later on when you need dice, they will go into the bag. When you roll a spell, there is no cost to summon the spell, to ready the spell. Instead, you just take that die and you put it in front of you, like you would with a creature. Sometimes none of these spells do, but sometimes a spell would be attached to a creature, and that will give it some special ability while the creature is readied. Maybe additional defense or attack, or additional glory if you're able to score that creature. But otherwise, the spell just sits in front of you, and you choose when you want to cast it, doing the spell effects that are listed on the card. Sometimes they're reactions, which means you don't choose to cast them anytime. You would cast them in reaction to somebody else's spell or attack or something. Whenever another player does something, you can react by casting that spell. Otherwise, you would normally cast a spell on your turn. That's it. It's a simple game. The complexity just comes in the wall of text sometimes that some of the cards have. It is worthwhile at the start of the game to read out some of these text effects and have players take note of those effects as well as the general face values of some of the dice in play. Keep going around the table until one player reaches the number of points indicated on the score track for the number of players. That's it. You're ready to play Quarriors, the game of uber strategic hexahedron monster combat mayhem. Get the first thing out of the way. Like, it's a dice game, okay? It's going to be lucky. But I've heard people complain about, basically there's like double luck, right? Because just like in Dominion, there's the luck of what cards you draw and win, and whether you're able to draw cards at the same time or not. That's the main luck in Dominion, right? Is when you shuffle the deck, what order are the cards going to come out? And in Quarriors, there's an extra level, because not only are you randomizing the dice in a bag and you're pulling out dice and you don't know what order those are going to come out in, but of course then you roll them. For some people, that double dose of luck drives them bonkers. Mostly hobbyists. You know the type. You know who I'm talking about. Those hobbyists that take the hobby just a little bit too seriously. Look, it's a goofy combat game, just roll with it. Maybe every decision you made was correct in the moment, but the dice didn't roll your way. You bought that dragon, but instead of rolling the super powerful level 3 dragon, you kept rolling 1 quiddity on it. I do like the second edition not second edition, the second set of rules. I don't know that you would call them second edition rules. The second set of rules that they published, which is that as soon as you score a die, so you summon the dragon, right? Whatever. Later on, it scores. You're going to get however many points that's worth, 2 to 4, based on the creature. Then you have to destroy it, cull it, trash it in Dominion terms. So you can't keep scoring the same dragon over and over again. But if you keep rolling quiddity, you still keep it, right? That threat of that dragon is going to come out again and again until you're finally able to summon it. And it can be like, oh, I rolled quiddity. I rolled 1 quiddity. I wanted to roll the monster. But you still need quiddity. If you had all monsters and you rolled all monsters, you wouldn't have enough of the currency left in order to summon them all anyway. So I just find that to be a little bit of a interesting balance. For that reason, I prefer the second set of rules. I think they call them the advanced rules. They're not really that advanced. It just helps a little bit more with luck of the roll. And the only way to get points is to destroy the very dice that you use to score points. So it just kind of balances out the luck just a little bit, but it's still going to be a crazy lucky experience. But the biggest annoyance in this game, and for me, it's a huge annoyance. I don't know, I feel like a lot of hobbyists don't have this problem, but I do. I hate it when there's lots and lots of text on cards. And it's made worse when those cards aren't in front of you. They're in the middle of the table. Now, in the case of Quarriors, at least they don't change during the game. So what comes out at the beginning of the game is there for the whole game. You can take the time at the start of the game to look at all the cards and read them. But of course, I have a poor memory. I'm going to forget. And so during the game, I'm constantly checking, what does this do again? Oh, this one has a burst symbol, which has a whole extra thing. Well, what does that do? Burst does nothing. Okay. It is interesting that an interesting way they did it. So you have, for example, the dragon die. And the dragon die always looks the same, right? It always has the same 6 sides. But it's paired with a different card, and there are different cards that can come out in a game. So not only, of course, are you not playing with the same dice every game, but even if you're playing with the same dice, the monster could be different. And it's a good way to do it. It might be worth different amounts of glory, that's victory points. The symbols, there's burst symbols, like little asterisks, and those have little extra rules when you roll the faces with the burst symbol on them. And those can do different things, or they could do nothing based on what card is out. It does mean that, from a practical point of view, I was never able to internalize all the creatures. So every time we play the game, we put out the cards, and I recognize the warrior of the key. But of course, there's like 3 different warriors of the key. And I have to look at the text and read the text and try to figure out, oh, what's this one do again? I never internalize it. And so I'm always like looking and trying to look at the text and see. And, if you're playing like a 4-player game, the cards aren't going to be facing everybody, right? They're all facing one direction. So maybe you have to crane your neck in order to read it. Text is fairly small. Wouldn't be so bad if it was in front of you, but what's in the middle of the table? Yeah, it's annoying. And in practice, when I play the game, honestly, I just, we take the time, we go through all the creatures, all the spells, and I just get it in my head like a couple that I want to focus on, right? That turn 0 thing, pick a strategy. I'm going to try to get this spell, maybe. I'm going to focus on just these 2 creatures. And the rest of it, like if that in that initial explanation, the rules explanation, or when we're going through all the different types, if there's a particular creature that doesn't really stand out to me, or I have a hard time remembering, or it just doesn't seem all that powerful, then I just ignore it. If somebody else picks it and rolls it, I'm sure they'll know what's going on. They know how it's used. They've read the text, and I trust them. But I'm just going to focus on kind of a more narrower range that I can choose from. And that's the only way I can kind of I can kind of play this game. Most gamers, I feel like, don't really have this problem, honestly. And, there's tons of games out there that have this big deck of unique cards, and you're looking and it has all this different text on them. I don't like those either. At least this is the same text that comes out and is in play for everybody. So we can all just take a moment at the beginning to talk through. Maybe somebody has a question, somebody reads it out loud. Another person is like, well, what does that mean? And we can kind of talk it out and explain it. And it's a very cleverly designed game, the way that they had different monsters, creatures, and spells represented by the same dice. So just a different card comes out. Personally, I probably would have preferred it just for my own taste if that wasn't the case, if it was just one type that I could remember and internalize between plays, so I know that the Warrior of the Key is always going to do this. But again, that's me. Certainly there is value in the variety. I feel like it's just a little bit childish, the presentation, oh, look how cool and awesome it is. Whoa, radical, man. That's the vibe I get from it. Like it's from the radical 90s. Gnarly 90s. And I just feel a little bit immature. Like I can't get into the whatever universe they're trying to create with this. It's one of those things, like, it doesn't make any sense. Just goof off and try to have fun with it, right? I think this game is probably less famous than a game that came after it. Same designers, same publishers, I think, still Wizkids. The game is called Dice Masters. When did that come out? A couple years later, anyway. And what they did with Dice Masters was they took the Quarriors core, but made it a 2-player only dueling game. So in this game, you're going for victory points, right? Glory, they call it. The goal is not to kill the other player. That's just a bonus because it keeps them from scoring points. But your goal is to survive, right? You want your monster still alive when your turn comes around again. That's how you get points. And Dice Masters changes this up, so it's a more traditional dueling game where each side has hit points and you're trying to drain the other player's hit points, right? So basically you could get a starter set, right? And it would come with, it was branded. So you would have, I think it started with X-Men or, Marvel anyway, Dice Masters. Later on they would have DC, TMNT, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Radical 90s. And you could, in theory, combine them, which some people probably think is pretty rad. I'm really into the 90s mode right now. And you'd have the starter set, but then you would buy boosters, right? The boosters would come with, I guess, another 5 dice, right? And a new card that represents those dice. And being a dueling game, in the style of sort of like a Magic the Gathering kind of thing, each player brings their own content to the battle. So I'm coming with my sets, you're coming with your sets. And so I would have these cards, just like in Quarriors, but instead of them being available for everybody to purchase, I'm pretty sure, I haven't played it a ton, that those cards just stay in front of you and can only be drafted by you. I tried to get into Dice Masters. I'm not a huge comic book fan, but I always liked Marvel stuff. In the 90s... In the gnarly 90s, I was a big fan of the X-Men cartoon. And that's what got me into comic books a little bit. I was on board. But the rule book I found was written a little differently. Now, I'm not a fan of Quarriors' rule book. It's a little too conversational, right? And they try to work in those cue jokes and stuff throughout. And I find it a tough read, honestly. But you make do. But something about the Dice Masters rules did not work with my brain, and that might be because I don't really play dueling games. In a tournament setting, I imagine that you would want the rules to be very, very clear and unambiguous, and it helps if you write rules a certain way to avoid that confusion. But whereas Quarriors was a little too conversational, I feel like Dice Masters went too far in the other direction, and I couldn't I had a hard time making sense of it. I never felt confident after reading the rules that I really got it, which is strange because it's not that complicated a game. It just worked differently than how my brain worked. But that's just me. I'm sure a lot of people had no problem with it. I know they didn't because Dice Masters was a huge hit. But I just prefer Quarriors because it's more accessible, it's more approachable. It's not even necessarily easier to teach than Dice Masters, because at least Dice Masters, I think you normally only have like 4 monsters or heroes, villains out at any given time, whereas in Quarriors you have 7 plus the spells and everything. So I wouldn't necessarily say Quarriors is easy to teach. Certainly the flow is easy. Again, it's that text on the cards that will give some players some difficulty. So I wouldn't say this is a great game to play with casual gamers necessarily. If you're able to walk them through it, and if they have questions about particular creatures and you're familiar with and you can answer questions, the game flows really nice. It really easily. It's funny when you have a very powerful creature and you keep rolling quiddity on it, right? Or somebody else, summons a creature and they think they're going to score, fair number of points with it, but you're able to summon a stronger creature and destroy them so they score nothing. These create the highs and lows that you want in a board game usually. I'm not going to sit here and say Quarriors is the most amazing game ever, but it is unique in my experience. It's a deck builder, or now we'd call it maybe a bag builder, because you're adding dice to a bag instead of shuffling cards. And it's sort of a battler, but it being a multiplayer experience and the goal being victory points instead of, killing the other player, it just changes the whole approach to the game and just creates a casual atmosphere around the table. Certainly the game has lots of variety in the box. If you're interested in the game, the expansion Cormageddon is a very easy recommendation, especially if you have this version, because Cormageddon is in a box like this one. The insert has enough for the dice from both. About expansions, very often with these sorts of games, the first expansion is always the best, because the first expansion is the more of the same expansion, right? It's similar to what you already know with the base game, but just more of it. And so more variety, but not really all that much more in terms of complexity. Certainly they don't really add a lot of extra mechanisms. It's just what's in the base game plus. And it's when you get to the second expansion, the third expansion, then you start to see gimmicks, themes in the expansion, that introduce certain mechanisms. And that's when sometimes these expansion sets can go off the rails, because you get into the case where you have expansion 3 and expansion 5 don't really work together. I just want a game where I can just put everything together, right, in one big box, and not have to worry about separating it out based on certain player counts or wanting to play with certain mechanisms or not. Quarriors definitely fits in that. Cormageddon, which is the first major expansion, is the more of the same expansion. Very easy recommendation. If you have the base game of Quarriors and you like it, go ahead and get Cormageddon, and it'll add a bunch of variety. Every one after that kind of introduced something, just like a unique spin on it, like a special thing, like different size dice, light quiddity versus dark quiddity. No, it was definitely diminishing returns very quickly for me after that first expansion. So for me, I have base game and I have Cormageddon, and that's good. That's all the Quarriors I need. And I still like Quarriors to this day. Played it a few times just recently, which is why I'm covering it today. You want a game to give you highs and lows. And this game does, right? The lows being rolling the dice and not getting what you want, right? But the highs being able to temporarily eliminate another player's creatures so they don't score with them, that sort of thing. Yeah, it's just goofy fun, and it does have those emotional peaks and valleys that you look for in a game. So I quite like Quarriors. For the type, if you like the types of games that I normally cover for this channel, the types of games I like, Quarriors is not that type, right? Those are the OGs, right? Those old school German games. that have simple rules, not a lot of text on cards. This is not that. So if you like the types of games that I usually cover on this channel, it doesn't mean you're going to like Quarriors, even though I like it. Consider Quarriors if what I described interests you, or you can check out Dice Masters in whatever theme you like most, whether Marvel or DC or D&D or TMNT or whatever. Up to you. I'm sure there's lots of this used stuff floating around out there. I don't think it's an active game, but you can easily find used stuff for it. If you like that sort of duel, one-on-one battler type of format, I don't. I prefer the casualness of Quarriors at the table. Thanks for watching. Older games like Quarriors don't stop being good because newer games come out. Oh, that sounded terrible. Take care.